Hello, everyone. I'm Katy and welcome to the Katy G podcast. So, as most of you may know by now, if you're a regular listener, the mission of my podcast is for us to realize that we're great and we can be even greater. And most importantly, how can we bring this greatness to the world through our brand, which is really through who we are as human beings? So I do this podcast for two reasons. First of all, I truly care about the humanity in all of us deeply, and I want us all to see how great we really are so we can be happier and sleep better at night. And second reason is look, we all struggle with this stuff. I do too. Struggle with my own feelings and being less than, or maybe I could be better, just like everyone else. And so some days are good, some days are not. And we want to be able to interact and have conversations with people that have solutions that could benefit us all. So today on my podcast, I want to welcome Dave Seitter. Dave is an attorney, and that's all I'm going to say about him because I'm going to let him introduce himself. Dave and I have known each other for almost a year now, Dave, I want to say. Not
Yes.
even,
Yes.
actually. And we met when I did an ABA webinar. And I'll let Dave tell that story if he wants to. But I got to tell you, you missed it. You missed the best part of this podcast, you guys. Dave was entertaining me before we started to the point where I almost had tears coming out of my eyes from laughing so hard because he's a comedian, but no, he's really not. He's a lawyer, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing very well actually. It's good to be here in Kansas City. It's a little bit cooler today than I'm used to it being, but we live in a great part of the country, and I really have a great law firm that I work with, wonderful clients. So I'm pretty blessed. Not sure how I got there, other than through a lot of really hard work, but I've been blessed.
Well, tell us about that. How'd you get to where you are? Tell us your story. What should we know about you?
Well, probably ought to start with the fact that I've moved around 7 times with my family, and I learned a lot through the process, met a lot of people. As a child, moving that often is not something that I would highly recommend, but it made me what I am today. And what I learned is that I have to try to assimilate with for lack of a better term, every culture, every place that I've moved to.
Mhm.
People in Omaha are different than Clear Lake, Iowa, which is different than Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is different than Denver and or Boulder, actually, and in Kansas City. There's some of the places we live. We live in some small towns too. Beyond that, Winona and Crookston, Minnesota. But everyone has their own little place in God's green earth, and you want to try to understand and assimilate and get to know them. So, through that process, I think I've learned a lot about how to develop relationships with people, what triggers and motivates people. And I try very hard to get along. Sometimes, to be honest, a little bit too much of a people pleaser, but I've learned that life is really about people. At the end of the day, it's to me, we all want to make a lot of money and have nice positions, but it's really about people and
So it
finding
sounds
your way through
like
the world.
So it sounds like you really have a really good sense of yourself. How do you think you came about knowing so much about yourself?
That's a great question. Part of it started with my father. I think I've shared with you. I wrote a book um, called "Quiet Plans and Exciting Results." Sorry, I have my symbol monkey here. He just started clapping for me. Stop that, dude.
I knew that was on your
Yeah,
lap. So
but
just for those of you who have no idea what the two of us are laughing about, we're not crazy, or maybe we are, and that's a good thing.
yeah,
Dave has a monkey, and, and it claps, and it was on his lap. It's not a real monkey, and it just started clapping all of a sudden. If you
and
take yourself too seriously, life is boring, and worst of all, you die young because it ain't
yeah.
good for your soul or your heart, right? So
I,
thanks for being fun.
well, I think you finally determine at some point in your life who you are. Maybe I'm finally to that point. I know I tried to craft myself into the Professor Kingsfield type of law student, and then the Ryan O'Neal in the movie The Paper Chase type of an attorney. I marveled at him because he was a hockey player as I was growing up. The point being with a large firm, the point being you somewhat stereotype what you think you should be versus really discovering who you are. And I had the fortunate experience, thanks to some of my mentors growing up in the law, also some clients that I learned from. You better go find out what you're all about. And I am not, by definition, a person that is going to be serious 24/7. I'm someone that enjoys people, and part of my differentiation, I think, is I enjoy being with people. And I think they get that, and in the business context, certainly in a social context. But by doing this, I've come to find out through a series of tests, one of which is called Colby.com, Kathy Colby's test, which I think is excellent, but
Yes.
also Strengths Finders, a couple other tests that I've done over the year. You figure out as you project yourself to to the world, how you perceptibly show up in their eyes, or you think you begin to understand it, and you figure out what your strengths are, and you start abandoning your weaknesses because you're no good at it. So do what you do best. I enjoy people. I get along with people. I do have, especially when I was a younger attorney, a very good temper. I've learned to moderate that quite a bit. As I say in my book, it's like taking a chicken to the movie theater when you start dealing with your temper. And what I mean by that is, if you take a chicken to the movie theater, it doesn't do a whole lot for the chicken, and after a while, it makes you mad. The point is, there's no value in being mad for the sake of being mad. It took me a long time to learn that. Lawyers are very competitive. Lawyers are
Yeah.
highly strung. Lawyers are very bright, and they keep trying to achieve something within themselves in their practice. And, my sense is, as best you can, try to figure out what you're about and live to that true north.
So
And I've enjoyed mine.
it sounds like you do a lot of work on yourself. And you spend a lot of time like with Colby doing the assessments and strength finders. And I know you have had a lot of you've employed a lot of coaches and whatnot from our conversations in the past. Why do you put so much effort into all of this? Maybe that's a stupid question, but you're a busy man. We haven't even gotten to your legal practice yet, but as I always say, curious brands win. Why are you curious? Why not just do the legal work and go home and call it a day?
I've determined, for whatever reason, that I'm a strategic thinker. I think the big thoughts in trying to assist people, and it goes beyond the law. I've come to believe that my law
Mhm.
degree is a vehicle to become a true counselor. In the state of Missouri, on our masthead, on the masthead for attorneys in Missouri, but it's also on our masthead for Spencer Fane. It says attorneys and counselors, and I gravitate to both. Probably gravitating a little bit more to counselor. How can we, help people? So you can't learn enough about yourself and other people, about their industry, about what moves them, about what's going on in the economy. You go to law school to learn how to learn. And that should translate beyond just the law. It should be learning about people, it should be learning about the business, learning about what is successful,
Mhm.
learning about what is enough, which is my favorite phrase right now. What is enough for people? And I think it's stimulating. I think it also is something that reminds me that I'm continuing to grow. And I think that's another part as you go through life. Don't we all want to continue to grow, at least to make you, I'm going to use the word believe, that you're still evolving, and that evolution of the human spirit, the human psyche, the human mind, the human feelings is a never-ending process. Remember, we're going to live here. The way medicine's going right now, we're going to live here on this earth to about 100. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So actually, that brings up a really good point. What about all the listeners? And a lot of my listeners are lawyers that are going, who has time for that? Who has time for this concept of growing and evolving? I'm just trying to keep up with my daily billables
Hmm.
and the deadlines. And if you're a litigator listening to this, well, if you have time to listen to this as a litigator, I really appreciate that. um, we all know plenty of those people because, and they're going to say, oh, maybe 40 years from now, not 40 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, I'll come to that conclusion when I have time. But I know you don't have any more time than the rest of us to give to this. So how do you make the time, and what do you have to say to those naysayers?
I think you come to a point in the practice of law where you hit a ceiling of complexity in your practice. And that is not my term, that's the term of a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan, who I attended his coaching sessions for 18 years in Chicago. What I ultimately learned is I had to figure out how to work more on my practice than in the practice. As long as I'm billing hours, I'm working in the practice, but I'm not developing the practice. So back in about it was 2001. In fact, I landed in Chicago for one of the first classes on 9/11, so it'll always be in my memory. Um, but through a class called Strategic Coach that Dan Sullivan founded, highly recommended, I started the process of working more on my practice as opposed to in the practice by developing the career. I think as long as we're billing hours, we're employees. If you want to take control of your career, you're finally becoming, I think, a true partner and frankly, a legal entrepreneur. You're trying to figure out how to get better at your craft. And the practical realities are, my estimation, the practice of law will get you to about age 42. At least that's my assessment, out of law school. And then after that, you got to figure out what's next. And for me, it's the E myth for attorneys. How do you work on your practice, your career, as opposed to in your practice, and then develop it out? So that set me free. The ceiling of complexity started to change. I started to evolve, and every week now, I have a weekly planner that I was trained by Dan to put together, where I look at what they call focus days. There's some days that are called free days, and then buffer days. You divide up your days. You're not even really looking at the day of the week, and you're trying to figure out where you spend time. Uh, is it with clients? Is it doing the work? Is it chasing the work? Is administrative work. And I've come to realize, although this will drive all the attorneys nuts, I am lousy at administration. I'm not bad. I'm lousy. I don't want to do it, and that's the problem. I don't care to be very good at it, and I need a lot of help from assistants, and it drives my firm nuts because I don't want to do any of it. But I don't do that well. And there's some people that really enjoy the ticking in time, you know, of billing and invoicing and filing. It's not my deal. I don't want to do it. I want to be either learn about the law. That's number two. Number one, out with clients, helping them with their issues that they have. Those are my goals.
You're one of the most efficient people I know in terms of, for those of you who haven't figured it out, Dave's a client of mine, but he just always shows up and he balances it all and he does it all. I mean, we have a time difference between us, but there's been some times where he's eating dinner as we're meeting. So, like, the level of commitment, I think, is really important. Is there a lesson you can teach our audience about those who want to do this for themselves? Maybe they don't have to fly to Chicago, I mean, regardless of pandemic or not, but where do they start mentally adjusting their own psyche in order to see themselves as valuable enough to have this level of commitment for themselves, really, that they'll put in the time? Is
Well,
that fair?
no, it's fair. I think the struggle with attorneys, I think, is we all are looking for perfection, which is just a misguided notion in everything they do. I know there's one attorney now runs one of our groups, and when I started with him over 20 years ago, I said, "Go screw up, go fail." And he looked at me like, and I used to be a bankruptcy trustee, so we could go over there and fail all the time because I'm the client. I said, the best thing you can do is go fail. So I'm not saying commit malpractice. I'm saying go try things, and some of them work and some don't. The number one rule that I've learned, again from Dan Sullivan, is you only learn from failure. Success is
Mhm.
a sedative. It just lures you into a false sense
Mhm.
of reality. Just so don't buy it. Go figure out what you're doing wrong. Go do some things that aren't right because then you can learn how to do it right. The next best thing, go watch somebody else make mistakes and then just don't do what they're doing. But I think you still have to do some of that. But there's a big component of mind, body, and soul, and we get lost in the law taking care of of people and our partners and employees, and we don't take time for ourselves. I think it's very unfortunate. So there's a mind, body, and soul component that I think we have to get in touch with. I mean, I get up at 5 o'clock, you know, 4 days a week to go work out. I have to have high energy to compete. I just have to.
Well, tell us
Um,
about a typical day for you. You read my mind because people are like, well, I can't fit it in. So
right.
you fit it in. Tell us about a typical day. What's that look
Well,
like?
I'll get up at 5 and then drive to see a personal trainer. I spend extra money on the personal trainer because I need someone to help me accountable, but also, to work on different issues that I have physically coming up. I'm getting older. I've played hockey. I got a bad knee. I've got bad hips from playing hockey. So we work on that. But it's also that cardio, doing all the things that allow me to keep going at a high rate because doing this takes energy. It takes passion. It takes drive. So I do that every Sunday. I will lay out what I'm going to do for the week, and I put in my calendar what I'm doing the day. And not only do I put in a calendar what I'm going to do any given time of the day, but I also attach the documents in the script and everything else so that I'm ready to go. I don't have to get prepared, which drives our IT people nuts because I keep overloading the computer and tearing up all of the storage space. But I like to get up. I like to come back and before I get going, do three things. One, I'd like to do a Bible reading, or a daily biblical reading. Two, I like to do a Stoic reading of something that from the great Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, etc. Things that could inspire me. And quite candidly, I find a lot of resonance in that because not only through biblical verses do you learn about adversity, but also happiness. Same thing with the Stoics, many of whom were existing at the time of Christ. So there's a lot of things I think we can learn. There's nothing going on in the United States today that hasn't occurred a long time ago, going back to the Spanish flu epidemic. But there was an even worse epidemic at the time of Marcus Aurelius, and um, actually killed him. Um, I think it was the Antonine Plague. It existed for like 25 years, you know, and so it's right up there with the bubonic plague. There are other people that have gone through what we've gone through. Can we learn from them? I think the other thing that I've learned, and I'm not very good at this, and somebody else taught me this, and it was really about a female attorney. This female attorney only does four things. She has her life, she has her family, she has her practice, and then she has her church. She literally does nothing else. I think she's like a former Miss Arkansas, that which they told me a story about her, one of the coaches I had. And I thought that was a great lesson. Don't try to be everything. And they try to get her to go to certain events. She said, "Look, it's not one of the four things. I'm not doing it." That
Yeah, fair enough.
um,
Fair enough.
so those are some of the ideas I follow.
So that's a really well-rounded perspective. And thanks for sharing your day. Because most people are like, well, should I be? But you're just very authentic. You really are. That's, I think, what struck me from the very beginning. Your sense of authenticity and the fact that, for those of you listening, decision making is a very important skill set. And I just remember you're a really nice balance of doing your homework behind the scenes. And by the time you and I got together, you were very clear. You already knew a lot about me. You'd done your homework, like you said. And You were just clear on what you needed and what you wanted and who you wanted to hire. And for me, that was so refreshing. And that was a sign of someone who's curious, who is in tune with who they are, mind, body, and spirit, and who still has a successful practice. And, you know, I just want my listeners to understand that he is not a figment of my imagination. He's real. And this could be you if only you decide that that's the perspective you want to adopt on your life as well. And I think it's critical to healthy practices to be able to make decisions and know who you are so you can move forward and get the support from wherever or get the access to resources that you need so you can thrive instead of being a victim of a practice and victim of time and a victim of all sorts of things. Um, yeah, does that resonate?
That resonates. I think there's two things that go with it. First of all, I still fail. I still do things wrong.
Well, I sure
Uh,
hope so. You're human,
and
right?
and
Yeah.
so yeah, so you learn about that, but you find that we're in a world of people that we're really dependent on one another, and it's not wrong to ask for help. And especially for attorneys, it really impacts our ego, our narcissism, our arrogance. You got to ask for help because, as with all of us, there's one or two things we probably do really well in the law, and that's about it. And I think it takes about five or six things to really run a law practice. So you're not even battling, 500. I think the other thing I've learned, and sometimes I don't hold to this religiously, but if I can remind myself, I have the 48-hour and the 6 month rule. And I share this with clients. I have to share it with myself. The 48-hour rule is if there is a problem you think is really difficult for yourself or somebody else, you don't have to ever solve it right then and there. I think that's especially with attorneys, even though the clients are all over, rarely do you have to solve it that day. Okay, there are injunctions, there are TROs, okay, there are people making demands. But most of the time, if you give yourself a little bit of a window, and I declare it to be 48 hours, you probably are going to be in a better place to make better decisions. Then there are what I call the D's: disease, death, divorce, depression, discharge, as in termination of a job, as an example. I say to people, you give yourself 6 months because those are sea changes that impact your world. And I'm not saying in 6 months, you're going to be out of it, but you've got to be good to yourself and say this is going to take time. And again, for lawyers, I'm just not sure we do that well. But I'm still learning, and I will continue to learn. Hopefully, evolve at a higher level, or to a higher
Amen.
level.
Well said. Well said. Very well said. So, before we transition, tell us a little bit about your practice area and how you got into this and
It
what's the
is
best part of it for you.
it is so friggin' convoluted because when I got out of law school, I thought I wanted to litigate, and I like going in the courtroom, and now I never want to go in the courtroom again. It doesn't stimulate me. I've been a
Mm.
little worn down by the battles, and I do think litigation at some level is a young man or young person's game. Excuse me. Although every once in a while I get fired up and say I'm ready to go back in, but I don't find that I am, from a practice management standpoint, really good to be a litigator. I don't think that I determined that's not how I was built. I
That's
was hired
honest.
to do that by a real estate firm, and I had no desire to look at real estate in corporate law. But I started doing some of their work, and then about 4 years out, there was an opening for something called a bankruptcy trustee, which this is 1984. Nobody knew that much about bankruptcy in the firm, so I said, well, I'd look at it, studied a little bit, applied, and became a bankruptcy trustee. And I did that for 20 years. The reality is that when you're in bankruptcy or bankruptcy trustee, frankly, for the most part, it's a lot of fun. And I
Mm.
wound up running businesses and hanging around with businessmen, um, telling them what to do in a manner of speaking. Uh, but I saw how to tear businesses apart, but I also saw how to put businesses together and sell them. And then that started getting me thinking about mergers and acquisitions. In late '90s, I had a client, a friend here in town, that did a roll up of a bunch of construction companies. And I don't know, that just hit a nerve with me that I thought this is fantastic, and I want to continue to stay in that realm. So I've done it off and on, but really have devoted myself at a high level in the last few years. So much so that I've evolved out of that into recognizing that what are M&As all about? It's really a function of succession planning. And when I spoke to a bunch of franchisees down in Florida a couple of years ago, I came to the conclusions on the spot. In one hand, I have stock, in the other hand, there's money. And all you're really doing is exchanging stock for money.
Exchange.
It's what I do in the middle. And you become, I'm sure you've seen this, you get to know people over a lifetime. You see them happy, sad, glad, mad, frustrated, depressed, and to build themselves up to that one point in time where they get to, as we say, monetize their business. And if you are lucky enough to have clients like that and help them through the transition, for me it's rewarding. And I really enjoy that, taking them from wherever they are all the way through the process. Hopefully, I have years with them and discover that it's like you've raised a baby, so to speak. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, it's counseling, it's supporting people,
yeah.
it's taking them through a birthing process. It really is. And you have a really unique approach to it mentally, I think. You look at it as really supporting people. And you said it earlier, it's a function of you use your legal practice to help people. Or you used a more eloquent language. Listeners, go back and listen at the very beginning to what he said, because it's a really successful mentality I have found when lawyers or anybody in any practice area, in dental, medical, whatever, adopts that idea that this degree, this saying I'm a whatever, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever, is a route, a tool to help people. And I know that sounds really basic, but I do not think people adopt that mentality enough.
Well, I don't know that everyone can or should.
Ah, interesting.
I think you have to figure out what you are. I believe that's my differentiator. And if I am an attorney, I want to figure out how do I differentiate. That should be the number one goal. Not to say that there's anything wrong with what you do. Well, what's that one thing? Reminds what's the film with Billy Crystal? The one thing, right? I can't think of the name of it, but
Yeah,
what's
I
the
know what you're
one
talking
thing that differentiates you and sets you apart from everyone else? And that will set you free going down the road, as opposed to, well, he's an M&A lawyer. Somebody this week said, well, everybody knows that Dave's an M&A lawyer. Well, if you would have known me 30 years ago, you would have never said that.
about.
So you
Yeah,
have to figure out, in the eyes of that client or that person, how do you differentiate such that they say, got to hire you, and we'll do business together.
and it truly has to be authentic to who you are,
Right, right.
because otherwise it won't work. And that's, I think, another part of what makes you super successful, that you, who you are, call it your brand, call it whatever you want, but honestly it's you. That's the phrase I've been using anymore these days. It is very authentic, and you're grounded and clear on who you are, because we just got done talking about how you spend so much time doing it.
But to
So
your point, in fairness, and this is an unabashed, and this is not a plug that she called for, but you've helped continue to refine that branding out of me. Because, and I would say this to attorneys, you get caught up in doing stuff, so you're working in the business. I think you have to continue for the rest of your life to work on the business, and part of it now is the branding. So to be blunt, you've shown me some things that I went, oh, I didn't see that. It gets back to my adage that everybody lives in a pickle jar. So you can see everybody else's label, but you can't see your own. But that's your brand, whether you like it or not. And I think you got to continue to evolve that. Why? Because you're continuing to evolve, and the clients, not even the clients, of people you're meeting are evolving, and they see
yeah.
different things, and you can't quite figure that out. So I thank you for that. You didn't ask me to say anything, but that, by going down this road again and getting ready for this call, I remember that. And I thank you and I appreciate that, because it helps me refine my act. Talk about perfection. We talk about perfection in the law. I don't want to get hung up on that term, but you want to get better on your presentation internally and externally in what you're about so that people can make decisions. Don't confuse people as to what you can bring to the table.
Well
You got to
said.
be very, you want to be clear because you're trying to help them. And if you don't qualify, you don't qualify. You're not going to make everybody happy. And if you can't make them happy, you probably don't want to because maybe they're not the right client for you.
Yeah. And that's all about introspection and figuring that out for yourself. So thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. And, I got to say, I appreciate you being such a good student of the world, honestly, not just with me, but as long as you adopt that mentality and keep it, listeners, there is no failure anyway. There's just iterative process. We're iterative as human beings. And so growth and exploration is the goal, I think. So to that point, Dave, let's show them what we're talking about so they can benefit from what you're going to. You have a challenge, I'm sure, on your plate right now because no one's perfect and you
Right.
haven't got it all figured out. None of us do. So what's going on? Give me one challenge and let's see what we can make of it and get you
Well,
to the other side.
here's the good news like everything else that everybody has, it's time. I mean, you can probably get whatever money you want, but you can't buy any more time. It's not possible. If somebody says you have no more time, right? You have all the time in the world and you have no more time. And so the question is, how do you use it and how do you use it wisely? It is the most precious commodity. And that's a struggle every day. Do I take this call? I don't, I want somebody to do my billing because that means I'm not in front of a client, okay, or I'm not learning. So
Mhm.
time will be forever an issue. And my way of dealing with it is to block out and allocate time and delegate. One of the things that, I wish I was better at, and this is where I probably fall down, and a lot of attorneys fall down, is how well do you delegate? And delegate to me is a function of do you express yourself clearly so you can be understood, and do you hold yourself and the other people accountable? I think every time I'm delegating something, I've got to do it by email and I got to call them. Why? Because I don't know if they're audio or visual and taking in information.
Right.
But I
Yep.
also want to confirm it that way. That drives some of the attorneys nuts, because a lot of them are not wired that way, if not all of them. And then, holding accountable. So I'll have people miss deadlines, and that's just one of my bugaboos, and it drives me, as I think with everybody, crazy because you're dependent on people to do things.
And
And
so those
so,
are those are resources on time management,
right, resources
delegation.
on time, yeah, those, thank
And
you.
how's that working for you?
It's a continuing struggle, and it will continue to be. We are fortunate. We're a very good firm from the vantage point that our core belief patterns, our core culture, our specific direction with our managing partner, Pat Whalen, I think is very concentric to the way that the law should be. We're not going to be the biggest. We're not going to be the most profitable. We're not trying to figure out how to, make the most amount of money. That's not a core belief for us, but we see a very definite path going forward on how to really relate to people to have the kind of results that they want in their lives. Not the results that we want, but the results that they want. That's my belief. That's the way that I, see it going forward. And it's just tough to do that every day. That's a big mountain to climb every day. But by doing that, there's a certain amount of energy that comes into me to say, that's the credo that I'd like to live up to.
Well, I love your challenge because, like you said, it's everyone's challenge, including mine. And you and I, we're not the same person. We don't have the same personality. But having worked with you long enough, what we share in common is that curiosity and that zest for life that makes us say yes way more than we probably, I don't
Absolutely.
even know, way more than we should is really relative. It's kind of like boxing us in a corner. But because we enjoy people, it's very hard to not take it on because you enjoy it. And that's the thing. Most people use that as their barometer. If they hate doing something, then it's
They'll do
pretty
it.
easy to say no and they have time around it. So, what I want you to consider is what I consider too is less is more.
Well,
And I
very good.
shine in that spectrum, and I believe that for you, when we keep the focus wrapped around fewer things, because I have discovered, and you have to discover this for yourself, but I'm sure you already have, when I focus on one thing versus a whole lot of things, and I can do both fairly well, but like it opens up this groundswell and the universe just expands and all this stuff comes as a result of it, probably because my attention is so solidly focused
Right.
there. Because even you and I as extroverts can't have our attention everywhere and achieve the same results and perform in the same manner as if we were focused on one thing that's not smaller but by nature is one versus many. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. In fact, I was going to leave, if there was going to be one word out of all this to leave with people, and this is the one word that this is my word of the year. I don't know if you believe
Oh,
there
totally.
is,
Mine is discernment. What's your word of the year?
yeah. Well, this year, and I got to thank Teresa Carey for this because she got me into this a few years ago. The word is enough. How much is
Mm,
enough? And what I mean by enough is how many more clients do you need? How much more money do you need? How much more
mhm,
time? What is enough? What is it when you said it's enough? Because I think, especially when you're chasing a billable hour and want to be a partner and want to be on the executive team and want to be out front, you want to do podcasts, you have to, I think, at some point go, then tell me what enough is, so that when you're there, you're done. Because I think it becomes a never-ending or a perpetual goal that you can never achieve. And there comes a point in time, maybe because I'm older now, where you're going, some of these things are enough. I'm not really learning anything new, and I'm
mhm.
not really evolving. So I don't need to do these things, anymore.
I also think it's a function of just being good with who we are.
Right, right.
Right. And I think
Yes,
maybe that's another way of saying it. Being, I don't need to learn anything new and I'm not evolving. I think there's always little sneaky ways we can evolve and learn something new. But I think what I sense you saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's just I'm good with who I am. And that's the enough point that I want everybody listening and every client and everybody really to
yep,
figure that out, that we're good enough. And there is no bar that I can anyone can set for me that I haven't already set, and my harsh bar that I set for myself is so freaking high that it's like self-sabotage all the time if I keep trying to meet it. So some people figure that out through illness, some people figure that
right,
out through other stumbling blocks. The
right.
goal is to not get to that point, but to just get there naturally and go, you know what, this is good, like you said, what's enough.
Well,
So
I think too, along the same lines, there's a component of being humble in all of
mhm.
that. And I don't know, including myself, I don't know that attorneys are really humble. Actually, I've got a good friend in the law, Dave Zimmerman, in the firm. He's humble, so he's mastered it. But most of the folks, not so much. So I think
Yeah.
it's something that goes hand in hand.
Yes, I agree with you. And humbleness is always a function, in my opinion, with my work, of our self-confidence level. The
Right,
higher our self-confidence level,
right,
because our stress is lower, the more we can be grounded and humble in who we are and leave some for others and not think that we have to rape and pillage and take it all because it's ours. Because enough comes from within, not from outside. And so knowing we're enough is an internal job. And that humility just is natural. We all have it. So, gosh, there's so much more you and I could talk about, but I know you're a busy man and it's about dinner hour your time, if not past your dinner hour. And your lovely wife is probably wondering who has got your attention now. It's me and the monkey, of course, clapping his hands for me and Dave. I just want to say thank you, Dave Seitter, because I think you're fantastic. If people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you? Is it on the firm website or
Uh,
email, or
firm
how can they?
website at spencerfane.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I am where else am I? That's kind of, I
I
don't, I
think
think I'm
those
on
two.
Facebook, but I never look at it. I've got a book out. You can pick it up on Amazon. Quiet Plans, Exciting Results. It's stories that I've gone through with clients with a heavy emphasis on what has made them successful, succession plan M&A how to hire an attorney, and then podcasts, and you know,
You're
worldwide
everywhere.
something, I don't know.
You're
Different.
everywhere. You can't be missed. I hope they pick up that copy of that book. It's a well written book. I
Thank you.
was looking through it again today. And anytime you need anything, think about what Dave's talking about, being enough, really managing your life from a holistic perspective. If an M&A attorney, and I'll let you talk to him about his numbers. That's not something we share on the air, but if he can do it, then you can do it, and it's doable. So thanks again, Dave. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
And I
you.
want to thank my audience for listening. This has been another episode of the Katy G podcast series on really knowing who you are and building that lifestyle that leaves you in charge of being the healer that you want to be, to take care of your life holistically and have a thriving practice that represents who you are. So until next time, Katy G out.